story.
Can we take all that?
I love that.
I'm still here going, where is it in here?
To know, isn't it?
It'll be on YouTube tomorrow.
Okay, then time.
We have time to memorize it.
Great, okay, but that's a good thought, isn't it, to know that He's a good God. And so that's it. You're finding your place at the starting point. You're finding your place in the story. It's exciting.
Right. So, turn to the next page, page 8. Where did it begin for you? And I do want to ask this question. Not everybody needs to answer it, but if you'd like to. And the question is this, did you grow up in a home where you were taught the things of God? Or did you grow up in a home where the whole concept of God and knowing God wasn't really on the radar of that home? If you feel comfortable answering that question, would love to hear some input at this time from you. What kind of home did you come from? What has been your journey, especially when you were young? What was home like for you as far as God, the relationship with God? We probably need to keep the comments brief, but if a few of you...
I'll answer that question. I grew up in a home where my parents went to church. They encouraged us to go to church, but we didn't really know why. We weren't told why we were going. And when we came home, it was all about there is a right and a wrong, and you're wrong. That's just about how it was, which is, which I think is the starting point for me being such a rebel growing up. There is right, but you're never it. You're always wrong. So that's really tough. And to see my whole family having gone down 6 really different ways of dealing with you're wrong was interesting. And most of us, my family, as you know, are convinced that we're right about everything. We're making up for it in our adult lives,
You're cleaner and you are better.
because we're cleaner and we're better.
Yes.
Exactly.
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So
Sure.
where you're at right now, and obviously we're in starting point in this group, do you consider this for you, are you still kind of seeking, the things of God, or is this a starting point for you, or is this a returning point? Where are you in your journey?
So is this a real question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So,
Good question.
So I stopped actually attending church at 12 when I flunked communion, so there was no, that's my big claim to fame. And I was the only person in my town, apparently, who had ever flunked communion, and there was a reason for that. But so I never had a starting point of any kind until 4.5 years ago, when I did say, God, if you exist. I mean, those were my literal words, God, if you exist, I need help. So that would be my starting point, and here at the church is my starting point. So
Thanks for sharing that.
you're very welcome.
One more person. What role has God had in your story at this point?
I talk. I was born and raised in the church. There was not a, day, the doors were open, we were there. And very, very strong biblical base, foundation, a lot of truth. But with that, there was never a time in my life that I did not know God, did not know what it was like to be without Him. So when the questions came, and they did around college, I don't know if my parents necessarily had a good enough answer for me, because it was kind of something I needed to experience on my own. So I think that my starting point was probably around college, and it actually took me on a detour from where probably my life was going, and took me kind of down the other way. Is truth, is there absolute truth, or is it just, we're kind of floating along? Is there a little bit of this and a little bit of that? Does it all kind of work together? Is there a God? And so I've been answering those questions ever since college, and I still question a lot of things, not Christianity or God or anything like that. The moving from Florida to California was a huge wake up for me, and I think that God just completely gave me it let me experience desperation enough to know, okay, that's what it's like without God. Enough. That's all I needed to know, and was able to really just, from that moment on, that was my starting point.
All right. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Good. Well, it's just fun hearing different perspectives and, you know, where people are at in this group. And as we continue on this journey, we'll hear from others, you know, as far as where you're at in your relationship with God. So let's turn to page 10 and look at this idea of the story behind the story. Excuse me, page 11. The story behind the story. And Valerie, why don't you?
Okay.
Sure.
This, we'll do less reading probably as the time goes on, but since nobody's had a book and studied up to this point, we do talk a little more the first week. So what we'll do is not always read through the entire page always, sometimes. And on this one, it's a super great page to read. So what we'll do is I'm going to start with this top paragraph, and basically we're explaining each week we will examine the Bible, a source of spiritual authority for people all over the world. In the specific section, we will read a particular passage of scripture in preparation for the group meeting. Our conversation will focus on what we can learn from that passage and how it applies to our lives. So we're going to get acquainted with the Bible. And this is such an important part right here, this little portion. So if someone would like to read, they can read the entire rest of this page, or you can break it up into two, whatever you want to do. But this is a really good nugget right here to read out loud to start.
Question.
So,
Do you recommend that you have the table participants read this, or do you read it?
they read it. If people will offer to read, it's really good to have, so you're not just all the time. So yes, would someone like to?
Sure, okay.
Could you speak up for the recorder if you don't mind? Thank you.
The Bible contains a number of different books written by various authors. Turn to the table of contents for a list of all of them. Notice that there are two main divisions, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that the books often vary in length. For example, Psalms is the longest book of the Bible, while others like Obadiah are short and easily missed if you don't look carefully. The books themselves are divided into chapters and verses and often given abbreviations. For example, Matthew 11, chapter 11, verse 28 refers to the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28. A few short books do not have chapters and are only listed by their verses. Example, Jude 15 refers to the book of Jude, verse 15.
Okay, thank you. So that's sometimes a little tricky if you're not, you know, reading the Bible all the time. But it does just give you, you know, the opportunity to, and when you do it, you could probably just open the Bible and say, here you go, here's the table of contents. This is how it's broken up into, you know, the Old Testament, the New Testament, 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament.
Testing,
66
testing.
books in all. Yeah.
They just want out here somewhere.
Anyway, so
Yeah, can you name them all? You can do it backwards.
I still can't. So anyway, being time cognizant, we'll continue on here. So we talk about the books of the Bible receive their names for different reasons. You know, some are themes. Some were talking about things that happened, like Exodus, the deliverance of the Hebrew people. Acts describes actions of the early followers. Some were named just by the actual authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There are different ways that they are distinguishable, you know, by numbers, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and so on and so forth. So it does break down right here everything about this wonderful book that's so good to know. And that way, you know, you can refer to this book is found in the Old Testament, this book is found in the New Testament.